Okay. So this topic of today's call is how to use stories to present yourself as an expert. And I'll tell you a little about me, and then I'll tell you how I got the idea for this call. It was a direct request from someone who's been on my other calls. My name, as you probably know, is Kathy Goodwin. I'm a professional writer. I have been writing my entire life, and I have written everything from copywriting to books, to fiction, to humor, to just about anything. And currently my focus is on writing copy, but also helping people use copywriting as a tool to accomplish their business needs, particularly branding and messaging. And in working with copywriting, I got into storytelling in several ways. First, I found that clients hated to write. And one of the ways to get around that is to start telling stories, or to transform what you want to say into a story, or look at the background for what you want to present as a story. And that helps a lot in getting over that hump of that blank sheet of paper, because even experienced copywriters get a little freaked out sometimes when we see that white page with nothing on it. And then there's a lot of bad advice on storytelling. I just saw a ad for a storytelling course, an online promotion by someone who is so famous that people kind of look at him as an icon of storytelling. And one of the things he said was, you must have a hard luck story. You must talk about how you struggle, how you were challenged to get things done. And my response to that is, well, first of all, what if you didn't struggle? Not everyone struggles. Some people have really a silver spoon story, not a hard luck story. And secondly, it's not always a good idea to share your journey story or your hard luck story. So there's a ton of advice out there. And one of my goals is to show you how storytelling has not been appreciated for what it can do as a copywriting tool and as a marketing tool. So that's become my focus. Stories help you create a big message for your small business. That's one of the ideas that you can take away. And also, a strong message is a message of strength. When you have a strong message, you communicate not just the message, but that you are a strong business owner who knows what you're doing, who stands out, who's confident. And people want to hire confident people. It's like, I've got a problem and I come to you and you're not confident. Now we have two people in the room who are looking at each other like, who's going to go first? So it's very, very important for you to be the confident one. My intention for the training is for you to learn how to promote your expertise, promote yourself as an expert, and get taken seriously for your business. Some of the symptoms that you may need to think about your message and how you're presenting yourself as an expert are, first, this ad came directly from someone who was on the calls for a few times that I've in the spring, since I started doing the webinars this January. And she said one of the challenges is being seen as the hired gun or even the hired hand, not a partner, not a true expert and partner in the venture. Advice can be ignored and boundaries tested. In other words, you're just not taken seriously. You say, well, I think you should do X. And they say, well, who are you? Guru over there told me something different. Or they test your boundaries. They want to call you at odd times. They want extra time. They want things given free. All those things are signs that you're not being taken as seriously as you could be, and you're not seen as the expert. Or you merge into the crowd like everybody else. A lot of Me Too copy, and we're going to look at some examples in our case studies. And you may not be sure what story to tell, because you probably were advised, tell your story. And you say, okay, well, what kind of story? And some people will tell you to dig deep and get vulnerable and tell the most heartrending story you can. But that's not always the best story. So let's talk about what we'll cover today, and not necessarily in this order, but through the case studies, we'll be covering these points. Some strategies to be seen as the expert, how to tell your best story, and some copywriting tips to support your strong message. There are 4 takeaways about how to present yourself as an expert and get taken seriously. First, there's the you rather than the I or the we. And we're going to see how when you write that way, there is research showing that you actually will come across more as an authority when you do not use the word I or we. I was surprised myself when I read this, because I read a lot of books and people always talk about this as my experience. I thought, wow, they must be good. They're talking about themselves. But actually, research shows that you're more likely to be using I in a memo or a letter. If you're writing to someone you see as your higher status person, I started to say your superior, but that would apply in a career, in a business, in a corporate job. You would be writing to your boss. And research shows that when you do that, you're more likely to say I. So when you're writing your copy, think of how you can remove the I's. And since I read that, I've been trying to do this myself. And then highlight the most important point in any piece of copy, whether it's a testimonial or a website, and build the rest of your copy around that. And we'll see some examples. Testimonials are part of the copy. I see wonderful testimonials get buried in the copy, hidden behind italics, big pictures, all kinds of things. Testimonials are really, really important. And don't be shy about having lots of them and putting them out there where people can see them easily. And finally, make simplicity a priority. When things are simple, you come across as very confident. You say one thing one time very easily, and people say, okay, I get it. And you seem to know what you're doing much more. So now we're going to look at some examples. This is a website that I have permission to talk about. It's called StoryMind. It is a fascinating website. It is one of the most original, one of the really most dynamic websites I've seen. And this is from two women Catherine and Elena, who, I got that right, who came up with this idea. What they are, they produce documentary videos for nonprofits and organizations that have a mission. So this website is wonderful. It just opens up with scenes from their videos that they've made. And I mean, I'm a documentary junkie. So when I saw this, I was like, I want to see all these videos. I think it's fascinating. But it's really good the way it's done. This is from someone in coal country. It's a really, I'm curious to see that, how they talk about Miss Coal in the heart of coal country. And this one, by the way, I'm noticing as I'm scrolling through these, that apparently some of these documentaries have won awards. And if you have anything on your site where you have won an award, make that front and center. One of the principles that we talked about is list the most important point, the most significant, the most salient, the most sellable point, the thing that will most appeal to your audience first. So in this case, why not put this one with all these awards up earlier in the lineup of videos? So you might want to think about that for your own website. Just take whatever is the most exciting and put that up top. And then they've got all these wonderful videos, and some you can play and some they show scenes from. And they have a quote, which is a good quote. A thing about quotes don't usually do a lot for a website. The only time is when you have to try to sell something that's people don't believe. So if people really think, hey, stories aren't that important, then you might have quotes about stories from well-known people. But probably this audience appreciates the value of stories, and maybe you don't need this quote. And it's a quote that's out there, because I've been looking for quotes on stories, and I came across this several times. So if you're going to use a quote, it might be better to have a quote from a movie producer or something from someone in your documentaries, or something you said yourself. Keep it unique, because anything that could be said by other people is something you might want to think about not putting on your site. And then what they do here, and we'll see another site that does this, is to have everything on one page. So there is a menu, but when you scroll down, you come to different parts of the page. General wisdom is to try to keep the pages separate, because it can be confusing to people, and you can reinforce things on each page. But you might want to test that, and there may be a very good reason for having one big page instead of several small ones. But let's look at this about page. This is where I wanted to focus on. And again, these are just very brief highlights. When I do a website audit, we just spend huge amounts of time on the website. So these are just very brief glimpses, and it gives you an idea of just a very, very small overview. So let's look here with this in terms of presenting expertise. This section is written a lot in first person. We know you want to tell a compelling story. And if you want to you should make your video about that. This is good. It's not about you, but it does have some abstractions in it. And then you come down to working with StoryMind, which of course is about them. We work with clients. And then this probably should come later, because people want to know more about the company before they're ready to think about, do we want to work with you? And this would go at the very And I think you could expand this. We give guidance and expertise. Anytime you use these more abstract terms, it might be good to find a way to make it more concrete. It is a good summary, and then if you were at a networking event, you said we give guidance and expertise to find the stories that serve the client's mission. They can say, okay, tell us more. But on the website, they cannot do that. So you might want to give them a little more background, flesh it out a little, or use more concrete words. And this is a good example of a testimonial that is a wonderful testimonial. It could be even stronger. When you have great testimonials, you want to milk them for everything you can. So if you notice here, what they've done is it's beautiful. They've got this beautiful picture. The words are easy to read. They stand out. They're italics and they're centered. Anytime you use italics or you center, you're making something harder to read. So it's a judgment call. Do you want to make it harder to read? And if I try to highlight this, we're going to be directed elsewhere. So I'll just have to point. When you work with StoryMind, you are not just working with video producers. What's the most important part of this? It starts out they're not simply talented tacticians. They listen to, that's kind of a longish abstract term here. And then but this seems to be, this is the heart of it. This is really what it's about. When you work with StoryMind, you are not just working with video producers. You are working with thinkers and experts dedicated to the craft of storytelling. And you might even modify this slightly. They're not just dedicated to the craft of storytelling. They're dedicated to making storytelling, to telling your story in a way that shows your mission, that helps you accomplish your mission. It would be good to know who Kyle York is. It may be a big name in the nonprofit world, but if not, then definitely say who it is, and may consider left justifying this and telling it in non-italic type, and also breaking this up. I would have to, and maybe break this up. In fact, I would open with this, and I have yet to meet anyone who objected to having their testimonial edited. What you can do, if you're nervous about it, you can send the edited testimonial to the person and say, we've made a couple changes, or just here's what we're going to publish. Is this okay? And I've never heard anyone object. Usually they even think of nicer things to say about you. They say, oh, you forgot to say how great you were in this. So that's something to think about with the testimonial. So another principle, remember, is to use them. And if you have more, and I'm sure they do, bring them out. And then I should mention, this is a wonderful picture. They've been partners for 6 years, which is amazing to me. And it's just a great picture because it shows they're fun, but also serious. I just love that pose with the pole in the middle. And I'm also madly jealous because even photographers cry. This is a beautiful picture. So this is the StoryMind story. And notice what they've got is a lot of first-person sentences. We founded StoryMind in 2011. Is this the most important fact for your prospect to know? We discovered we not only work well together, we prioritize. This is good, but this is something that you could rephrase to say, you will benefit from our ability to combine creativity with organization and preparation. And you don't have to apologize and say this is nerdy, but in the creative world, it's unusual. In fact, this is a good place where you could have a quote and say, Amy Poehler just showed, we reject the idea that creativity has to come from chaos. And I'm not sure what her quote is, but Amy Poehler is someone people would know. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a short quote, and it's not super well known. And then organization is the key to creativity. Instead of saying we believe, at this point, it would be helpful to say something like, why organization is a benefit to the individual. You've got a lot of philosophy, and for some people that'll be just what they want, but you want to think about making it more action-oriented and using shorter words when you do this. And then we are committed to sharing our experience. These are credentials. I've noticed that a lot of people don't like to share their credentials because it seems so show-offy. I mean, I can relate because I have a PhD, and there's always this big discussion, should you put it on your business card? Should you show people you have one? And for every person who says it seems show-offy and outrageous, there are 3 people who say, I want to hire you because I see you've got this degree. So there are always going to be people who are going to look for your credentials. And this is very impressive. Center for Documentary Studies at Duke University. Duke is very impressive. The UNC journalism is one of the top in the country and maybe the world. You've taught there, put that front and center. And the launch was written up. You have to show why this is very impressive. But this shows something about what? Your PR skills, your uniqueness. What was it about this? You might even have a quote from it or something to show that. And then recognized by, it might say we've been featured instead of recognized. And you could even, one thing you could do, I just thought of this off the top of my head, is to have something down the side, more of a sidebar with links, with icons and links to the places where you've been featured, because you've got so many famous places and recognition. And this, again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but that's taking up a lot of space. And this, you might consider having a contact form or a link to a contact page instead of all these emails down here. Emails always are odd on a page, or if you're going to have them have a, just have a form. If you have any kind of an email service, and if you have a subscription, you have a subscribe somewhere, then you obviously have an email service, and they always have forms. If you're using something like MailChimp doesn't give you a lot of support, so you have to figure it out. But most of them will help you, walk you through how to set up a form. So that's all we have time to say about StoryMind. It's a wonderful site, and I encourage you to go back, storymindmedia.com. This is Nancy Jane Smith, who I talked to briefly, and I want to say that the reason I chose this site is that it doesn't do her justice. And we talked about it a little bit. This is just a very rough draft of her site, so you should not judge the site. It's at an early stage. You'll probably look very different later. But she's got this warm personality. She's a life coach who's been a therapist. And when you talk to her, she's got this great aura that says, you could tell her anything. And she's really warm and caring. And one of the things I have suggested is that she put a video or audio of herself, maybe 90 seconds, because when you have a great voice, especially if you're in the helping field, put that up there. That's a way of showing and not telling. And definitely change this picture. She's got a really good, on the homepage, she's got a great picture of herself. This is a great picture. It's more pictures like that would be appropriate. This one here is a couple, it just really focuses more on the background. If you're going to have pictures, one thing I recommend, and very few people do this, one thing that's really helpful is to have a picture of yourself at a desk or working with clients or in action. I've seen people doing things like this one person had a picture of herself doing cartwheels on the beach. And you have to ask, what is the purpose of that? Do you really have to show that you're a down-home person? If so, maybe you would. But really think about it. I have to admit, I myself did that. I had a picture of myself wearing shorts, holding the dog. And some people really liked it because they said, you look relaxed. But other people said that really isn't the image you want to create. So that was a long time ago. I hope I've gotten better, but I still have issues with that. So there are some things you want to think about. What's interesting about this page is it doesn't show how unique she is. And yet when you talk to Nancy, she is so smart and she has so many unique perspectives, so many interesting ideas. One thing that really stood out that would be, if I were writing the copy, I would pick this as the most significant. You can't will yourself happy. You can't hustle your way there. That's something you don't see every day. Sometimes it's not you. It's not about just shifting your mindset. It's about the environment. It's not how hard you work at being happy. So maybe consider starting from there. A lot of the parts of the site are very similar to what you see elsewhere. So the principle of finding what's significant and making it stand out would be starting with this. And I have a feeling if she were interviewed in detail if we did a consultation or anyone who did a consultation, we often find things that are really surprising buried in the copy when we do consultations. But this is an overview, so we won't be able to go into that much detail. Then here she's got something, a little bit of a hint of a journey story. For years, I thought happiness was something I could find if I were skinny enough, and then finally exhausted, stressed, and beyond frustrated, I stopped and I learned, if you're going to tell this kind of story, first, you need to tell it in the context of a massive success. So if she says, and now I'm speaking all over the country and I'm doing things, and maybe she is, but it's not stated here, or something about what she's doing now. Put this in the context if you're going to tell a story of your journey. And secondly, go into more about how you have learned how to change. So she said here, first, for years, I thought happiness was something I could find, just stop pushing, and finally I stopped pushing and started listening. It's not a particularly unique message, although when you hear her talk, she's really much more individual and much smarter than, not smarter is maybe the wrong word, but she really has her own system that should be on this page. So I thought that happiness was what I could find. And this is something most people can relate to. If only I were skinny enough, or this, whatever, I would be happy. And that is a script. You have to be careful about being too particular, because if she's trying to reach people who had the if only message, this would work. But this is one time when I would say you might want to actually generalize a little, have more, maybe 3 or 4 examples, because if someone doesn't relate to this, they may not want to continue. But what would be a better story is a story of how she worked with clients over the years and developed a system to meet people who were smart and bright and based on other pages here, who looked like they had it all together, who had every reason to be happy, but were not happy. And she could tell a story that at first I didn't understand. I looked in the literature. There were no answers in the literature. So I had to come up with my own system. And I did. And that's what I do now, only fleshed out. She has a great background. This should be front and center, because a lot of times life coaches do not have a counseling background. She does. So that means if you talk about an emotional issue in life coaching, she can deal with it and doesn't have to refer or come out. And then here she says, I value. Put your own values. Some people like to see your values. They do like this. I have heard people say I hired so-and-so because of their values. But if you do that, tie it directly to how that helps the client. So in this case, what's important is to just show she's had all this training, because people who are interested in training will want to see it. Now, Myers-Briggs is an interesting example, because Myers-Briggs is a red flag to some people. And I've talked to Nancy about this, and I don't think she's a super enthused Myers-Briggs person, but I'll let her fix that on her own site, however she wants to do it. But Myers-Briggs is something, some people, as soon as they see that, they're going to click away and never come back. Some people are going to say, Myers-Briggs, I love it. You have to decide. I'll give you an example. I once worked with a pastor, someone who is a religious person who wanted to get into life coaching. He wanted me to help with his website. So one of the questions that came up was, how much do you want to talk about religion? And he wanted to put a lot about religion. He asked me, should that be in there? And my answer was, well, if an atheist showed up and said, I want to work with you, what would you say? And he said, well, they probably would not want to work with me, and it would not be a good fit. So then what we did was write a lot about religion on this website, because that will scare away or discourage atheists, but will encourage people he wants. So that's how you decide what to put on your site. It's what people want to see. So that's all we have time for on this, and we are a bit behind. So I'm going to go to the next one. This is Anya. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Now, I have to give a caveat about this website. Anya wrote and said what her challenges was coming across as an expert when she is a virtual assistant. She wants to be taken seriously. She knows a lot about the web, and she actually gave me the idea for something that I'm going to be working on in more depth and more articles. That, people say, oh, I'm just going to hire you, and you're just going to do what I tell you, and not realizing that she knows a lot about the internet, she knows a lot about writing, and has a lot to offer. So this website was translated from German by Google. So it's not her language, and we can't go into the wordsmithing and copy very directly, because idioms were lost, and it's probably was very different in German. And the question is at the top, the first thing she has at the top again is this: anytime you have anything that isn't smooth and simple, remember we talked about simplicity, it's going to raise credibility questions. So one thing we got to have here is the online, I think this is, I don't know what this is in German or what it really means, but this should come off because the first thing people need to see is the top. This is a great picture. It should go below. And also the first thing people should see is not, here's what I do. It's really a strong headline, a command of something like, something very compelling, maybe something like, let me help you create a compelling website your clients will love. That's not a great one, but I mean, it's you write 50 headlines for a headline. And that would be one of them, but that would be something very, very strong. This here gets into the simplicity criterion for expertise, because what we have here is what we call colloquially a laundry list. And I don't know if they use that in German, but you've got everything. So what you want to do here is have one umbrella concept, just one idea here that people can see immediately and share it. Up here you have an authentic and professional website. It does not have to cost time or nerves. I remember when I went to a copywriting course by one of those super copywriters who was very good, and she said, I never want to see you say save time and money, although we all still write that, but if you can avoid that construction, that's better. So anytime you talk about something that people expect, try to make this more unexpected in the headline if you can, a little element of surprise. Here we've got a video, and this video I would definitely take off. This is actually hurting Anya's credibility because first of all, you say click play and look how it works. The German is probably clearer, but it really seems to explain what a VA does. And we can have here, if we click on it, you can see it has loud background music, but it appears to be general. It's not something, I don't think, that she wrote. When you have a video on your site, you want it to be nice, but probably not too polished, because if it's too polished, it suggests it's not genuine. And definitely, positively, if you're going to use a website like Animoto or Lumen 5 to make a video, make sure that the credit for the company goes at the very end, if at all. You can pay more. If I were going to use Animoto or Lumen 5 a lot, I would pay and get rid of the link altogether. They have theirs at the very end. But this is clearly a very generic video. Generic videos do not help your credibility and do not give you a sense of expertise in most cases. So let's look at the most important part. First of all, I would absolutely not use italics or light gray, because anything that makes things hard to read is going to impact your credibility and your understanding. And again, I'm not going to get into the words because these words are probably some kind of loose translation from German, and they're big, multisyllable words, and I don't know if that would come across the same way. But we've got this, who are you? Who are you would be, that's okay, but think about what's the most important part of this website, of this section. Everything you hear, this is what struck out for me. Everything you read about online marketing overburdens you rather than helping you. And again, that's rough because it's a Google machine translation, but it would be something like you're getting overwhelmed with so much information. And what she's going to do is cut through. She's going to help you put the pieces together, and maybe a puzzle analogy would work. I don't know enough about Germany and German to know if a puzzle makes sense, but she's going to put together the pieces of design and copy and emails and all that for you. And then great product, a clear message. Again, are you going to help them clarify the message? And a lot of knowledge. The good news is I have a solution. Again, this is very general. So what you may want to think about is, what do you offer that helps? And think about what's the part that's unique and maybe right around that. And again, this would get my vote. And then we come down here. You might want to use the picture you used on top, because you're not going to need that. If you think about it, here you are surrounded in a meadow or superimposed in flowers. And if you are a VA, or if you're relatively new, then it's a good idea. And I which one reason I avoid pictures, and my own picture is even my image was, my cartoon image is photoshopped, because the original one was different color, looked a little bit off. Think about the image. So in this case, if you have a picture of yourself with a headshot, maybe wearing a suit or something that could be a business top, that would be stronger, especially if you want to establish yourself in a field like virtual assistant where someone could just mistake you for a hired gun. Then I imagine your online facilitator. And again, the translation is tricky here. With me, you get everything. Again, there's a lot of I with me. Everything is with me. So think about this. This is a good point. You get everything for one source. And so turn this into a benefit. You don't have to say with me, or you could say, well, we work together, or just, it'll be pretty clear. You can confidently put your world in my trusted hands. Maybe see if you can find a way to say that without using the term my hands, me. Something like you can walk away, you can go about your business, and we'll take care of your getting your online presence up. What I think, if I had to pick one, I'm using I'm giving here, but the one thing that stood out for me on this page is simplicity. For me, and you can get rid of the words for me, no technical language or complicated word games. You get everything simple, so you can understand everything clearly. And you could talk about why it's important for them to understand that it's not enough to just turn something over to somebody and cover your eyes and ears and say, do it. Because if you do, you will get creamed. And I know people who have been hurt. So I'm totally with you on this. So this might be something there. So think about benefit, not values, but benefit. And you might have a section on values. Some people do, or my approach. But if you do, then just have a section saying my approach. Here's how I work with you. And that I instead of trust, it might even be something about consistency. Think about Federal Express. What does Federal Express do? They don't just move your package, but they give you confidence. You know, if they do what they're supposed to, and they don't always, you know where your package is every minute. And that's the kind of thing you offer. Integrity, again, you might have testimonials, because whenever you talk about yourself this way, it's like, okay, you're saying this, but how do we know? So I'm sure you've been in business a while. Put testimonials if you're going to use these. The form could go on a separate page, because just have a link to it, because it's a long form. As you know, in general, keep it as short as possible. And then Anya does the same thing that our StoryMind site did, that we looked at earlier, have everything on one page. And you might want to consider having this separately as a portfolio that people click to. It's a good portfolio. I didn't look at the copy. I couldn't see the copy and couldn't read it if I could. But this is an example. You have to be careful. People are always asking me for samples. Most people hate the samples that you show them, because they're different. They're written for a different audience. So be very careful in putting this out. Unless you want to emphasize design, these designs are nice, and you can talk about them, and you can make this a stronger way. And actually could be a services page. What you might want to do is, here's what I do, here's an example, and set it up that way. That's good to do that. And then the form again, and this is very good again, but this is to say, here's how we work together, here's what I do. Instead of I, make it you, okay, or just what you do. You get a clear, and why is it good to be simple? And we know, but they may not know. What is good about this? You have benefits here, which is very good. You could be more precise, more specific, suitable keywords. You might want to talk about how important it is to have someone doing the translation who knows business, because otherwise the words will be there, but the meaning won't be lost. Everyday tribals, I'm sure that's a German idiom that we would not use here. And then I organize and service. But again, if you're doing a list like this, try to break it up into 2 or 3 parts. You got 3, and you do kind of have 3. But if you have a long list of things, it does come across as not being as strong as having a short number of things. And then you can work with me in 2 ways, done for you, and we would call this done with you is the more common phrase. The question I would have, again, in terms of credibility here, is to keep the word I out as much as possible, make them steps, but then if you say, I take you by the hand and show you step by step what to do, this is very time consuming, and it actually can take more time than doing something for someone. So you might want to clarify how you do that, because it's confusing. So when you get some of these things in place, my hunch is that you will find that you are getting people who are more appreciative of what you do and respect you. I want to introduce you to some of the things I do, because you may not know what I do, and you may have friends who can use what I offer, and you may want to refer them. and that would be great. So my new book on Amazon is a Kindle book. It's anyone can afford it, and it goes into more detail about using stories, and it's been very well received. And this is the link, mycopy.info/KB story, or if you go to my site, you'll see pictures of it. And then if you've never worked with me before, I do have a consultation, which is just a shorter amount of time than the full-scale consultation. We only cover one question. It's 45 minutes, I think. There's the latest version, and it's just $97. So it's one time, one thing. It may be a way for you to ask one quick question to start working with me at a more entry level as a prelude to a larger consultation or project. So if you get a sense from here, if you liked what I did with these websites, then think about if we did this in a few minutes, think what we could do with 45 minutes or 90 minutes with your website and your sales letter. So thank you again, and we'll see you on a future call.